Hey everyone. My God, when can we please start being able to hear from people that are not indoctrinated into the faith, into the religion of statism? Oh, this is the thing that I see is the most profoundly important, and has such a dramatic effect on the psyche of the people, no matter where you live, Canada, US, UK, anywhere in the Western world, or even in foreign countries. I don't know that I'm not familiar with, but you know, we all know that using phrases and terms when you're talking about publicly funding something, this is my problem. Now, okay, this is in reference to, and I mean, they have somewhat, there's a couple decent, respectable people at the Tyee. This is in reference to an article from the Tyee. It seems somewhat grassroots or alternative voice in Canada, media outlet, and I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt on a continual basis and hoping that they can be reasonable and offer a narrative that's outside of the political narrative that you hear from the establishment media. But I see continuously, it's like they always want to race down to that lowest common denominator. They want to use the faith, the religion of the state, as the means, as the basis for everything they espouse. This is the number one problem that's coming from you people. I'm going to point them out, both of them. David Beers and Robin Smith. This is in the Tyee Media Check, 10 Ways to Build a New Canadian Media Ecosystem. Subtext, the independent digital public interest journalism sector is essential to the industry's future. Now, let me just read now, because it says by David Beers and Robin Smith, yesterday, policy options. Now listen to this. David Beers is founding editor of the Tyee and an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. Robin Smith is current editor of the Tyee. Now, Robin Smith, I'm not hearing much about what Robin Smith, he or she, what the background is, but David Beers comes from academia. Listen, because we all know that the religion of statism is just as entrenched, just as profound as any of the old world religions, right? Even of Christianity. Now, if I was trying to look to objective reporting, like think about me as say I was an atheist or didn't have any religious ideologies that I adhere to, right? Would I want to look to people from the Catholic faith, the Protestant, Presbyterian, Baptist, to give me the opinions regarding religion? No. So when you look to people from academia, representatives of the state, okay, if you're a teacher or a professor that works for the state, you're a representative of the state, so your biases are going to be at the forefront in your brain, in your psychology. So stop using these people from academia, stop using these political dogmatists as the basis for your understanding or what the people need, desire, or yearn for. And I mean, this, even before I read the article, when I seen this, that was the first flag that, the red flag that was raised when I first started even read this. But as usual, I don't just go by a headline or the contributor. I go through, I'll take the entirety of the information presented to me and make an assumption or an opinion based on the totality of the information presented to me. But when you go down through this article, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But basically, editors note, this article was first published in Policy Options as part of its special feature, The Future of Canadian Journalism. Ailing, beleaguered, and being murdered, according to its own headlines, 2016 was a rough year for journalism in Canada. Entering 2017, it shows no signs of recovery. Legacy media are still struggling with the digital transition. Advertising dollars are all but gone, sucked up by American web platforms and social media juggernauts. Subscription dollars so far do not appear promising enough to fill the gap. So yeah, social media, because we're having a dramatic and profound effect and having an alternative narrative presented to the people, they're pissed off. This is what it comes down to, is those that want to propagate the message of the state, right? They don't want you to hear those alternative voices, the alternative media. They want to make it so that you can only hear political dialogue, even if it's conflicting, but it still has to function inside the realm of the state. This is really what it comes down to, and how I know we're going to go, that's what their premise is when they're talking about this. At first, when you start reading through this, it's like I was actually starting to agree with it for the most part. Of course, we need better and different objective journalism comes from many different platforms and outlets and people from different backgrounds and opinions and preferences, right? But then it doesn't take long. Actually, let me just read a little bit more. Our country's large-scale news organizations face huge challenges that are not going away. As one Toronto newspaper honcho recently acknowledged, the loss of traditional advertising dollars that once sustained his publication has been so severe that indeed the very business model itself is at risk. The result is that the survival of a well-funded democratic media that holds the powerful accountable and facilitates deep and nuanced discussion about political issues or public issues is seriously threatened. We have relied in large part on traditional corporate models to provide such forums in the past, yet in that media sector there's no reason to believe we won't see more layoffs and further diminished capacity. But in Canada, the CBC represents the largest propagandist or media outlet in the entire country. I mean, they robbed the Canadian people to the tune of $1 billion. I mean, it's propagated everywhere, whether it's in radio and television, right? I mean, it's everywhere. And on the internet, CBC, the tentacles of the CBC Corporation reaches out, and it's a Canadian Broadcast Corporation. It's a government publicly stolen from the taxpayers, the tax slaves, the tax serfs, funded institution, and yet they're saying that that's somehow not enough. Well, listen to what else they have to recommend down there. They came up with 10 recommendations, but let me just, some of the recommendations are decent, and I'll post a link to this article in the description of this video so you can read all the recommendations. But these are the ones that I want you to really listen to and understand and see where they're coming from, so you can understand that, yes, they're not talking about having objective, unbiased reporting. It still comes down to having a political narrative. And how you know that? Okay, here's where we get to that point. Okay, here we go. Okay, 10 policy ideas. Okay, so here we go. See, this is the problem. And I hope the people that read the Tyee, or the contributors, editors, or the owner of the Tyee will listen to this video. I know I don't have a gigantic amount of reach. You probably never will. But just in the off shoot chance that you may, please listen to what I got to say. Quote, stop waiting for some rich angel to underwrite an organization like ProPublica and just publicly fund most or all of it. ProPublica is a U.S. national nonprofit organization that develops and shares highest quality public interest journalism with other media outlets. Other U.S. models are the Center for Investigative Reporting and the Center for Public Integrity. Next one, provide public businesses or business infrastructure funding for the independent digital sector. Rather than paying for content, this funding would be to promote collaboration, innovation, lobbying, and legal support, wherever sharing best practices and achieving economies of scale can happen. Once again, and this is the third one out of 10 so far, right? Provide publicly funded 2-year transition bursaries for journalists coming out of universities or being laid off from news media to subsidize their pay to work in a media outlet of their choice, including independent digital news media. This would keep alive the craft and allow talent to select and find its most appropriate homes. But I mean, if you're going to publicly fund it, holy fuck. I'm curious to know what the IQs of these people are. I really need to know, and how deep they are entrenched into political dogma, right? Beliefs. Because publicly funded, if you use theft, because that's what publicly funded, that's just a nice way of saying steal and plunder the taxpayers, because not like the taxpayers will say, oh, okay, I want to opt in or opt out. When you create something that's publicly funded, that means you universalize that, so you don't leave anybody the ability to say, no, I don't want to be part of this, right? So it's forcing everyone to pay for these news sources. And if it's publicly funded, do you not think that there's going to be a bent towards legitimizing government? Right? If it's publicly funded, if it's all about using government, the institution of government as a means to redistribute or take from people and transfer to others, like I say, next one, create a $500 annual tax deduction for young or all citizens for money they spend on new media. Now that, once again, it's still all about government, even though a tax incentive might very well benefit in some way, shape, or form. But if you read through, I won't read all 10 of them, just read through them though. Almost, the whole thing is almost about you need government to counteract government narratives. We have such biased media, but now we got to create and use publicly funding, which is stolen money from the taxpayers, and create another crony establishment. Like I say, holy fuck. And hopefully, any of you people that are putting forth the shit, call me out. If you want to challenge me in a debate, intellectual, I don't care. Listen, if you want to make people like myself sound stupid and try to make us seem like idiots for standing up for the private sector and not using the power of mysticism and forced subjugation as a means to an end, then allow us to have a voice on your platforms, on your stage. They won't ever allow that. I wonder why that could be, right? You're not hearing anything about saying, hey, let's promote, people like myself. I mean, and even not even talk about myself, but there are people that are much more successful and have much higher viewerships in Canada, like Press for Truth, Dan Dix, and those and the like. I don't hear them say anything about them, right? Because, like I said, it's all about, they at least have to have a political narrative. You have to have a narrative that at least enshrines and keeps the power of the state foremost and at the forefront of the psychology of the people that you're trying to propagandize, right? That's my fucking biggest issue. Stop using these goddamn antiquated methods. You're going to be left back in the fucking dustbins of history at some stage of the game if you keep playing these stupid games. And I'm only saying this to help you because I'm hoping that some of you in these up and coming news or media sources will start to realize that no. And yes, you might, yes, of course, I would recognize too that if I could force people to pay for my setup, right? If I could force people to pay for me, then I would probably have a lot more reach. Matter of fact, I know for a fact because I know you can buy likes. I know you can buy subscribers, right? I know how this manipulation works on social media. I know how easy it can be done. And for you can get thousands of extra, make your page look way more popular for a mere hundreds of dollars. So under that pretense, wouldn't I be the one, especially with a page as small as I am, I would probably benefit the most from this kind of initiative. And I am going against it for the reason of I don't want to use theft. I don't want to build a plunder and steal from other people to make my voice heard, even though I know it would probably benefit people greatly. But the ends or the way to get to the end, the means don't justify it, right? I should never be promoting using theft and forced subjugation as a means to an end. The Tyee and the people in the Tyee, and like I say, in Canada, in socialist fucking Canada, people are so religiously dogmatic these days, and I get it, especially the older people, but they've taught the millennial generation through the power of indoctrination in the education system to be very dogmatic too. Fortunately, Gen X, we had that small window and time frame where they were off too busy doing their shit to even care about what we were fucking doing. So we weren't indoctrinated to that kind of level. So a lot of us maintained our ability to think critically. Thank goodness for that. But we have to really stand up. We have to fight. We have to stand solidly against this fucking bullshit. Yes, we need alternative voices in the media. I am one of those alternative voices, and I'm not looking to plunder or steal from people to make my voice heard or louder or to have a wider audience. I hope that people will share my stuff, but if they don't, I'm not going to look and reach for the force of government to make that happen. The Tyee, the people at Tyee, these David Beers and Robin Smith, they seem to have no qualms, no issues at all with using the power of the state to get what they want. I'm firmly against that. And here's another thing. I'm just going to say this one last thing before I tie up this video. The more you fuckers keep playing these games, if you force people like myself down to your level, know this and know this with utmost certainty. If we ever reach the stage of the game, and it looks like we're heading in that direction, where you're going to force people like myself down to your level, trust me, there are many different ways that we could use to make our voices, to make our reach much broader, much wider, and much louder. If you force us to go that way, to use that approach because we have to counter your approach, then like I say, you will lose that battle. It's time for you to step back, step away from the state, stop using the power of force as a means to an end, and start showing a little bit of solidarity with those of us that are trying to bring reason, common sense, logic, and actual philosophical principles and evidence to light. Stop hampering and hindering us. Start showing a little solidarity, or at least stop fucking trying to silence or quell our voices. If you do that, then it'll not just benefit you and I, but all of the rest of Canada and anyone else that's looking on. They will see that we're willing to do the right thing instead of the easy, or instead of the brutal way of using propaganda or forced subjugation as a means to an end. They will recognize instinctively that this is the way to go. Be a leader. And by being a leader, I mean lead by example. This is the Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.